So there we go.
Who would ever have thought Dijon would cut the mustard?
Oh, he was so far into it.
Beautiful.
He was so far into it. We could just cut
I wish
after
I'd
my
come up with
half,
that
my
one.
Just do
last
it.
entry. Just leave it in. From Autosport.com and Autosport Magazine, I'm Kevin Turner, and this is the Autosport Podcast. Well, welcome to the second episode in our series looking at the greatest Grand Prix in World Championship history. We've got 100 to get through, and we're going to do that at 10 at a time in specific categories or chapters, because it's actually from this book that I have helped Roger Smith put together ahead of Christmas 2025. And joining me is Roger. Welcome, Roger, back to the Autosport Podcast. How are you doing? You enjoying the series so far?
Enjoying it very much. It's great to be here, and I look forward to more of these.
Excellent. Well, I'm going to introduce Stuart right away, because last time when I left it, he butted in anyway. So, welcome, Stuart Codling. How are you, sir?
Yeah, fabulous, thank you.
Excellent, excellent. So, have you got any more Grand Prix coming up? When's your next race?
Yeah, I will be, after this recording, going to Qatar and Abu Dhabi.
Well, let's get on with the episode that we're doing today, and it is Duels. So, just to outline those who may not have heard the third episode just yet, but take a look at it if you haven't. We're looking at the 100 greatest World Championship races, obviously 75 years since the World Championship for drivers began. We are including the F2 period in 52, 53. We are not including the Indianapolis 500. So, Roger, when we were working out the chapters, how we could break this 100 down into bite-sized chunks, as it were, what definition did Duels is fairly easy, I suppose, isn't it, really?
Well, it is, but I think it's for the aficionado of Formula One, in my view, because a duel isn't always the most exciting thing. But if you
doesn't necessarily mean overtaking all the time, does it?
No,
it can be
it
more
doesn't.
subtle than that.
It's if you know about racing and have the feeling for racing, the fact that one driver is managing to keep ahead from another driver who's managing to hang on for dear life, or not necessarily even for dear life, he's actually sort of there, and they're competing for lap after lap, and one of them is gonna win. Either somebody's going to make a mistake at the front and the chap's going through, or whatever the way it comes out. It's mano a mano, man against man. They're locked in combat. And we've had a subtitle behind Duels called First Among Equals, so you've got two cars, two drivers really sort of at each other, and it can sometimes be for the entire race. Other times are shorter duels, but the duel is the thing, and it's a fascinating part of motor racing. Not always the most exciting, but absolutely riveting.
F1 Duels, World Championship Duels, I should say. Number 10, the 1970 Belgian Grand Prix. So this is the late Spa, the last years of the proper big
original
Spa, the
circuit,
original
yes.
8.8 miles, or whatever it was. Not that the current Spa isn't also amazing.
Yes.
Pedro Rodriguez in the BRM hadn't won for several years, versus Chris Amon, who was still awaiting, and he's still awaiting his first World Championship Grand Prix victory. So, and this one, Roger, was pretty much, I think, a race long, wasn't it? The chase.
Yes, it was. Virtually all of the laps, these two guys were locked together. But the first thing one has to talk about is the fact that Pedro, who was a lovely guy to watch. He was again in this wonderful Yardley livery that I have a certain penchant for, but he used to sort of lie back in his car. He's quite a diminutive figure, and he had this silver helmet, and he's sort of bobbing out the top. You could see this guy, and there's a lovely picture of him in the book here, with Amon right on his tail, with his famous red and blue flash of on his helmet as well, but. He'd come from P6 and made his way through, and then he took the lead fairly early on. He was in the lead from lap 5 through to 28. So, as you say, they were locked in this combat, and they ended up 1.1 seconds apart at the very end. And there was hardly any time between them, where nobody pulled out or fell back particularly. They were just going for it. And if you think about that, sort of you're absolutely having to be at pretty much 10 tenths to hang on or keep ahead in these circumstances. So that, well, I don't know how they managed it after 1 hour 39 minutes, 38 minutes
And on such a hairy circuit.
on such a
as well.
circuit.
Absolutely, it was even more fearsome, wasn't it? The old Spa.
That's motor. I mean, that's motor racing, and it's just the sort of thing that I sort of put it in there in this Duels thing, because it's the side of motor racing that sometimes in this day and age doesn't have enough crash bang wallop in it or something, but it's actually fascinating.
Because if you go to the Belgian Grand Prix and you stay somewhere to the south of the circuit, you can have the joy of sitting in a traffic jam on the old circuit. And a few years ago, we did just that, and every day we sat in a traffic jam and crawled through Burnhamville the wrong way. And you actually think, well, firstly you think, at what point did Moss's wheel part company from his Lotus?
Yes.
1960. Yeah.
And then you think, you imagine pushing at the limits of cross-ply adhesion through this corner with just a guardrail and trees on the other side, and that's before you get to the master kink. So utterly remarkable.
We should say that Chris Amon's fastest lap, to give people an idea of how quick this track was, the average speed for his fastest lap was 152 miles an hour. So that really tells you something, I think. And it's kind of unusual, isn't it? Because BRM hadn't won for 4 years. They kind of just got hold of Tony Southgate, who was sort of starting to turn them round for their sort of Indian summer before they collapsed completely. And the March 701, which I maintain was deeply mediocre.
Nobody's idea of a great Grand Prix car.
And Rodriguez and Eamon, who were just excelled at Spa, and I think Eamon said that Pedro just didn't make a mistake that whole time. He was under pressure all that time. He just never put a wheel wrong. And just on your point about Rodriguez's finesse, I'll tell you the best demonstration of that. I know this isn't Formula One, but the footage of him dancing the Porsche 917 around Brands Hatch in 1970 is something else. Unbelievable car control.
But both those drivers, they're not greats, but they are superb Formula One drivers.
Yeah.
And other drivers, of course, with Rodriguez, but in other theatres of motorsport. But they're just terrific drivers.
Number 9, the 2006 Bahrain Grand Prix. Now, this is almost a handing over the baton moment, isn't it, Roger? A little bit? One generation to another?
You've got to remember the background is that Alonso had won his first World Championship in 2005, and here was the first race of 2006, and they were back at it, Schumacher versus
Schumacher hadn't been able
Alonso.
to play a part in that 2005 title because of the state that Ferrari and Bridgestone got themselves in with the one tyre per race rule. But 2006 was a proper Schumacher, Ferrari versus Alonso, Renault, pretty much all year. And this was what I'd call almost a typical modern Grand Prix. And it wasn't passing and repassing all the time, but it was two absolutely flat out, lots of intense in-laps and out-laps. Who's going to make it out of the pits? They're side by side, really, really... We're talking sort of hundreds making the difference across the race.
And that's how it was at the end. Alonso went longer at each of 2 pit stops, and that kept him in the fight, such that when Schumacher came out behind Alonso, and Schumacher couldn't pass just in the same way that Alonso hadn't been able to in the early part of the race. It was that close. The whole thing was an incredible duel over the whole duration of the race. And you say sort of Ferrari versus Renault and Schumacher versus Alonso. Don't forget it's Bridgestone versus Michelin as well.
Tyre war years,
which is very significant there.
Also quite ugly as well, that battle, wasn't it? Ended in litigation and...
Yeah, although not on track so much. On track was okay, actually, if you think how hard those two drivers were. They didn't have too many moments. Do you think, Stuart, that Alonso winning the 2006 title against, let's call it peak Schumacher, because it's pre-retirement and motorcycle crash, kind of almost adds credibility to his 05 title?
Yes, it does, because, as you say, 2005, the Bridgestone runners had that massive disadvantage, and except at the farcical US Grand Prix, Indianapolis, of course, where there weren't any Michelin cars.
Yeah, that hasn't
in the race.
made the list of the 100 greatest races. I think we're not giving too much away there.
If we had 100 greatest farces, maybe.
Oh, yeah, top 10 F1, shambles, that would probably be on it. Yeah.
Also, I kind of thought, having watched bits of this race again, the way Alonso slams the door in Schumacher's face as he sort of comes out of the pits just
yes.
ahead. Firstly, that was very much being given a taste of his own medicine. Secondly, I kind of thought, imagine if the modern day driver guidelines were applied to that. Did he have his front wheels ahead of the mirror?
Don't go there.
Was the left wing mirror sticker ahead of the? Yeah, quite. Well, I mean, I think Schumacher knew Alonso was the guy in the way that Senna knew Schumacher was the guy coming along, didn't he? Right, well, let's get on to a rare thing. I think this is a rare thing, and it almost went in another chapter. Number 8 is the 2010 Chinese Grand Prix, which, Roger, are rare because it's two wet weather greats having a duel in the wet. We don't often see it, do we? They seem to take it in turns to have masterclasses in the wet, but this is Jenson Button versus Lewis Hamilton in the same car, on the same tyres. And I thought this was fantastic, this race.
Yes, I agree. And of course, Jenson came out ahead on this occasion. And I've always admired Jenson enormously for taking on Hamilton and going to McLaren.
Well, he gave credibility to his 09 title by doing that.
Oh,
didn't
it
he?
did. I entirely agree with you. Yes, it did. It bigged up Button's title very much. And on this occasion, they got very close. I mean, I think Button generally had the upper hand, but Hamilton did what Hamilton can do and sort of reeled him in gradually. And they finished, only 1.5 seconds apart.
Yeah.
But it was amazing to see two guys in the same team, as you said, in a wet conditions, going for it.
Hamilton looked quite rattled at times, didn't he? Didn't he nearly take out the Williams pit crew in his hurry to get out of the box at one point? It wasn't clinical by his standards.
No, he had that wobble, didn't he, at McLaren in sort of 2010, 11. Before sort of getting it back again. But I think we got the right winner, because we should say that Jenson lost a lot of his lead over Hamilton due to a safety car period, which is what brought them together. They then had I think an 18-lap run at the end, both on intermediate tyres.
That's
and you
right.
kind of think, given this is only a couple of years after Hamilton's masterclass here at Silverstone, winning by over a minute, you think Jenson could be in trouble here. But Jenson actually pulled away from him initially, but I think he then ran out of rubber first.
Yeah.
And Hamilton is actually, that's probably been an underrated part of his game, certainly at that time. Came back at him and finished, as you say, just a second and a half behind. But I think that's one of those great forgotten Grand Prix, that one. So I'm really pleased that we were able to get into this list.
It's because it's China and people think of it as being a dull racetrack that has processional races, but actually there have been good ones there.
There have been some good ones, yeah. I mean, any objection to these? I mean, me and Roger sort of put these lists together. Have you anything offended you so far?
When I first, because I'd forgotten about it as well, so when I first saw 2010 Chinese Grand Prix, I thought, what is this outrage? and then I looked back at it and thought, oh yeah, actually, yes, I remember it now. So it's kind of weird.
My very first top 10 greatest drives list for individual drivers, which I've now done 25 or something, was Jenson's, and I put that as his number one. I thought beating Hamilton in the wet in the same kit.
Yeah.
And I think it didn't require the luck that he needed in Canada a year later, which everyone always goes on about, when he'd hit just about everything. Right, number 7, complete change of era, 1970 German Grand Prix. So this is a one-off race in a way at Hockenheim, because in those days the German Grand Prix was normally at the Nürburgring, but it was going through one of its, well, this was part of the Jackie Stewart. You really do need to sort it out, chaps. And obviously the fact that he'd won there in the wet and been world champion gave him a bit more credibility to get away with that sort of thing. So Hockenheim, fight between the Lotus 72 and the Ferrari 312. And Roger ended up a fight between Jochen Rindt and Jackie Ickx on a slipstreaming circuit.
Yes, very much slipstream battle, and it started off with, I think, about 5 cars, including Regazzoni and the March pair. I think it was that Siffert and Amon. And then it sort of came down to these two. And the thing I like about it in particular is the fact that it was very much a sort of Lotus Aero versus Ferrari grunt. So it's something you don't see so much or can't have so much in today's Formula One, which was a factor of Formula One in the past, when an engine superiority or a technical advance in an aero or in the chassis could give that sort of improvement or advantage, and that was the way it was going. I mean, there was quite evidence of the fact that sort of Ickx was coming at him along the straights, and then the Lotus was pulling away in the corners. And it was still incredibly close, and of course, poignantly, it was Jochen's final victory that year.
It was probably also helped by the wedge shape of the 72, wasn't it? The latest 72 kind of set the template for what a Grand Prix, well, a single-seater racing car should look like. We've talked about that before.
Side pod radiators and all that.
That's right, radiators on the side. So I suspect it had a drag coat. I mean, I've not put the two cars in a wind tunnel, but I imagine the Lotus 72 would have a lower drag coefficient than the Ferrari.
It did have a triple deck rear wing, which astounded me when I was watching, because I've looked back at the footage. The Lotus 72 went through so many iterations that you have to remind yourself of the various things, but there is some newsreel footage available. It's not like a complete Grand Prix with commentary. In fact, it has some quite peculiar jazz music playing over the top, which is disconcerting. but for me, just looking at that again, when you're aware of Rint's career and his driving style, he's known for being the wild man. He really dialed that back to get the best out of the 72. Once that car sort of was silk personificated, because it was a disaster at the beginning of the season. And you would think that Rindt would be all over the place as he was in the 49 at Monaco, but no, just beautifully smooth. And he was really, really dialing it back, like he knew how to get the best out of that car. And it was really, really spectacular to watch, even though the extant footage, not necessarily all in the right order.
The one thing that counts against this race slightly is I think that Jochen said that a monkey could have won that race in this car. So he obviously felt that it was more the car than him that was able to do that, which I thought was quite interesting.
Should have won by a bigger margin then.
It seems a bit close for that comment.
But then maybe he'd learnt at that point in his career finally to subscribe to the Fangio, you win at the slowest possible speed. Well, I suspect it wasn't fast enough to break the toe.
Yeah,
that's probably what it was. He knew he was. If it had been in clean air, maybe he could have done. But
didn't want to go fast enough to break the car either. It was a Lotus.
Well, I mean, yes, quite. Right, now I think I'm right in saying the next one, Roger, is our most modern race, most recent race.
Yep.
I think. So it's the 2024 Azerbaijan Grand Prix, Oscar Piastri versus Charles Leclerc. So, yeah, talk us through this one.
Well, I have to say, I thought this was a very classy drive by Piastri. It was the way that Leclerc was leading, and Piastri went for a pit stop, which caused Leclerc to go for a pit stop, and Ferrari didn't do that well, and so the gap closed down, and Piastri read the moment so well. The fact that he took the opportunity to make that pass, which was an incredible pass, quite a long way back, totally unexpected by Leclerc. I mean, he was caught by surprise quite clearly. And then, of course, because he was still, what was that, his second season, wasn't it?
Yes, yeah.
Yep. So Piastri's still comparatively, a new boy, and from then on, to keep Leclerc behind him, not make any mistake around Baku for lap after lap, that's a duel, to say the least.
Stuart,
and it was amazing.
Right in saying that McLaren had told him not to attack yet, save your tyres.
Yes.
Yes.
And he just went, no, this is my moment, which I like. Someone that inexperienced, I like that kind of, I've got a feel for this race.
He backed himself.
And I think Leclerc opposite, he thought, I'm going to get him back. I'll get him back later. And he just never could he?
No.
He did try a few times. It was quite amusing to. I think there might be an element of bruised ego there as well, because as Roger says, he was clearly not expecting it, because you see him sort of turn into the corner and they go, oh no, there's a McLaren there that I wasn't expecting, and he tries to cut back in, and Piastri quite rudely slams the door in his face, and then he did it again a few laps later when Leclerc tried to go around the outside, which is quite hairy stuff in Baku. If you try and overtake around the outside there into turn one, it's challenging. It didn't come off, but he tried to cut back in, and again, the Senna-esque chop.
I would argue it's still probably his best race in F1 so far, Piastri's. Not his most dominant. I know he's had some more dominant races in 2025, but
I would say so. I would say so. And could I just make a small point about the front cover of this book?
Yes.
Because we've got Oscar Piastri on the front cover, and that race that we're talking about now is partly the reason why I backed Piastri to win this year's World Championship. When this book went to press, it looked as though Lando wasn't going to make it. You know, he was a bit all over the place. Piastri was coming through very strongly, and this particular race, in my mind, that one in Baku, made me feel that Piastri had something that wouldn't allow Lando back into the championship. Now, of course, we know better. There's been this extraordinary development in it, but that was when we went to press. We decided it was going to be Piastri's year.
Slightly ironic that it's Baku as well, because that was where it really came undone for him this year, didn't it? I mean,
It certainly did.
it's not over. It's not over. It's not over yet. But the first half of this podcast is number 5 on our list of duels. One of the oldest entries we've got, the 1953 French Grand Prix, which some media outlets at the time described as the race of the century, which, given that it was the 1950s, I think was a bit of a bold claim at that point.
A bit premature.
A bit early to go with that, I would suggest. But I probably shouldn't say that. I'll probably use headlines that have been proved to be subsequently not very good anyway. So this was a duel right to the very end, wasn't it, Roger, between the established best, probably, or one of the two best, and the first up and coming British talent, really.
Yes, Mike Hawthorne famously won this race and beat Fangio by a nose. What was it? 1 second by the handheld stopwatch.
Yes, I mean, I think it was close to coming out of the last corner, wasn't it? But it was a genuine duel. But I think the punch of the Ferrari 500 had it over the Maserati.
Yeah, the old Ferrari grunt again came through, and it was. I mean, it went on for 2 hours 44 minutes, and that's what you have to bear in mind. And these two guys were going at it for all that length of time, changing position. You can read the sort of change in the lap winner's position.
It was very hard.
In the book.
We should say it's at Reims, wasn't it? The very fast slips. Another one of these slipstreaming.
Yeah, that's a hot time of year as well.
Hot time, yeah. And it wasn't the only thing going on, because Jose Fernan Gonzalez led early on what we'd consider now to be the alternate strategy. Just lighter fuel load, and then he came charging back, and I think Ascari finished within 4 or 5 seconds of the leading pair as well. So it wasn't like they were a million miles down the road. You've got the 4 top drives of the day within 4 or 5 seconds after 2 hours and 3/4 of racing.
This is another one where there's Pathé News footage on YouTube, and it is remarkable because the cameramen were suicidal in those days. They'd be standing right on the apex, and of course the cars were all cut away, so you can really see the driving styles. You have Gonzalez, that sort of quite stocky character, really working the wheel, and then the finish. They're literally, it's not even half a car length when they cross the line. It's utterly remarkable. And once again, the Maserati A6 GCM, lovely looking car. And also just, you really did see the drivers' different styles, and just absolutely mesmerising, even with no particular narrative, because it's newsreel footage. You're just watching these ancient cars just really being muscled around corners, and you imagine the height of summer, and as Roger says, the races were longer in that point. They were nearly 3 hours long, so just to have that sort of stamina, drivers needed to be really a cut above.
We probably need to factor in the context of the time as well. We have to remember that for about a year, the only person that won a World Championship Grand Prix was Alberto Ascari, and those races were not close. No. So you can understand why the journalists jumped on this race, because not only was it not an Ascari win, it was a fight to the very end, decided by mere seconds across the top 4. So it must have been a real breath of fresh air after. Here's Ascari again. Give him a couple of calendars, and the next guy will be along. So, probably context helped that one. Jumping further forward, much more recently, the 2014 Bahrain Grand Prix, which I reckon was one of Lewis Hamilton's best drives. Not because he was particularly quick, because I think actually teammate Nico Rosberg was the quicker driver on the day.
He'd honed his car very well, Rosberg, and he was really hooked up.
Yeah. But because of the way that the tyre strategies played out, I think Rosberg, in relative terms, been better when he was on the slower tyre. So when he was on the quicker tyre, Hamilton knew he was going to be up against it. But this, for me, is a win for racecraft. So this comes back to what you were saying: a proper duel with arguably the quicker driver car combination not winning.
And this is in 2014, so it's the first turbo, the first hybrid year, when I suppose that Rosberg was beginning to learn what he was up against with Hamilton. And I have to say, one of the photograph in this book is absolutely fantastic. I just got to show it because it's amazing, whereby you can see the despair of Rosberg and the Hamilton's eyes are absolutely bright and shining, and he's absolutely full of it, because it sort of, they came to do the interviews and they were still there in the moment of the race. And I think this photograph shows exactly how much it meant to each of them.
Well, they both knew that Rosberg should have won.
Yeah, yes. That was a full year and a bit before the hat tossing incident as well, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yes.
I seem to remember Rosberg being a little bit upset about some of the moves, but I don't think there's anything untoward. I think Lewis just put his car in all the right places at all the right times. Yeah, because Rosberg would come down the inside and Hamilton would tuck back past him again. And actually, thanks to Mercedes as well, because we've had periods of domination by one team, and that was the start of their period of domination, wasn't it? But they were very early on. It was clear that they were going to let these two get on with it. Which hasn't always been the case with some dominant teams.
There was a little bit of a preview of later racing between the two of them, in that there was an element of one or the other of them at any given point diving into turn one and not releasing the brakes early enough. And then further on down to, is it turn 3 or 4, where it comes back on itself. There was also a little bit of...
And the two of them had history, hadn't they, in the past? They'd go-karted against each other and so on.
So the third one, this did happen here. We are at Silverstone. It's one of the great Silverstone races, the 1969 British Grand Prix. Roger, between, I would argue, probably the two best drivers in the world at that time.
Without doubt. And it's another one where I can say, I was there.
Excellent. We like that.
And I was watching...
Where were you?
I was at Club Corner. And there was this point when later on in the race where the rear wing end plate sort of came loose on the Lotus falling apart. And I remember very clearly not only seeing it and seeing how close it was to sort of cutting into the rear tyre, but Jackie Stewart in a typical sort of manner of, sort of wee Jackie sort of mannerisms, pointing to Rindt as they sort of were going beside each other to say, watch out, you're going to get into trouble here because it looks so you could have a puncture from it. And of course he had to pit, which broke the spell of their duel, because it was a fantastic thing. We'd been waiting ages for these two to actually sort of keep going, because Rindt had a bad period leading up to this race. Where
always quick, but never there at the end.
But never there at the end. And here it was, Rindt and Stewart, mano a mano, and it was a terrific duel. I think Stewart talks about it a lot, as though they were overtaking every few yards almost. He talks about multiple overtakes. I don't remember it quite like that.
I don't think it was.
The footage I've found quite supportive of that, but I think perhaps that demonstrates the intensity that he felt.
Yeah.
Yes.
And of course they were friends as well, which I think is why. I mean, let's face it. If Max Verstappen came alongside you and was pointing your rear wing, you go, yeah, try the other one. But with these two, they were friends as well, and of course a more dangerous era where you would look out for each other a little bit with that sort of thing.
Can I just give one little anecdote?
Please do.
When we were at qualifying, I was at Woodcote, and on the outside, sitting in a grandstand, sort of, hadn't bought it. Of course, you can go where you liked at that particular time. And you may remember that during qualifying, the paving sort of on the edge of the track, the curbing, came loose, and Stewart came round, hit this, and I remember distinctly seeing the curb sort of shoot up in the air. Stewart's tyre was punctured, and Stewart spun right in front of me and thumped into the barriers, which were, sort of those wooden sort of...
Oh, those wooden sleeper things.
Yeah. Wooden sleepers. And he went so, hard into it. And he was out of there like a scolded bunny. The the belts were off and he was out. You know, there's always the risk of fire with those sorts of things.
Or someone else joining you, sure.
Yeah.
Or someone else. And
Especially there.
and afterwards he went out in the MS-84 Matra and did some fast lappery like that, and he was very crab-like coming through Woodcote in that four-wheel drive car. But after the race, and this is extraordinary to think about it, we were able to sort of just leave this grandstand area and go and look at the curbing, which had been dislodged. And suddenly Jackie Stewart was there, and he was had come out to see what had happened. And then Jochen came, and you know, sort of Jochen didn't have the sort of words that Jackie had, and I remember Jackie saying to Jochen, "I wouldn't get too close to this corner tomorrow if I were you, Jochen."
I mean, they were the two outstanding drivers of that season, and this was the duel, as you say, that we'd been waiting for. Everyone had been waiting for.
Yeah. Also, I think the nature of this race, it's as you said earlier, Roger. It's not that it's kind of passing and repassing. It's that sustained pressure of that sort of, I wouldn't even call it a cat and mouse thing. It's like a dog chasing after a greyhound chasing after a rabbit, and just putting that pressure on in the hope that the other guy makes a mistake, and it's that just that sort of sustained thing. Such a shame that it all came to an end in very silly fashion.
It would have been interesting to see how they would have played the finish, because on the one hand you've got Jackie Stewart, we've talked about in the previous episode, with his always had the extra capacity to think his way into race wins, but Jochen was the master of F2, which was also a slipstreaming kind of category in those days. So I think they would have been. And of course, Rindt came in, got the car fixed, and then had a fuel issue, and had to come in again. But they were so far ahead of the field. I mean, they lapped everyone. It was just
yes. I think that's a good point to make. They were way ahead.
Yeah, within a few laps, they were seconds ahead of the pack.
Even though they were probably taking time out of each other with their.
Exactly.
I mean, you never know with memories, do you? But I think Jackie was of the view that they would overtake each other in places where it's like, well, we're just going to both lose time if I block you. You slipstream past me here, and I'll get you further round. A little bit like a Formula Ford. It was Formula Ford, wasn't it? Formula Cosworth DFT.
Well, that's that sort of experienced racers for you, though, isn't it? It's not getting too caught in the moment and just knowing that you have the ability to catch and pass.
I mean, how long was the race? Let's have a look. It was nearly 2 hours. Yeah. So there's no point trying to break the other guy in the first 10 minutes when you know you're that evenly matched. You just go, well, let's get rid of everyone else first.
It's another bizarre one when you watch the footage. When Rindt comes in and they have to put fuel in, they have to sort of like spanner off this bodywork panel. You're thinking, what? What are you doing? And then out, and even the commentators going, well, what's going on here? Because of course they all say they're generally posh in those days. Yes. And this massive sort of big sort of churn comes out and a big spout. And they pop the spout in because they take the thing off. Then they have to take the cap off. And Rindt's there going. In your spout
and still finish fourth.
Yeah, I was going to say it's amazing he finished fourth.
Which I don't think he scored many points at that point, so it was probably welcome points. But yes. Right, well, let's look at a duel that did go all the way to the end of the race. Number 2 is the 1994 Japanese Grand Prix, which I believe is Damon Hill's greatest race. I think he does as well.
Yes.
And actually, it's that what we were talking about before, a very rare case of a duel in the wet. And how often did someone get the better of Marcus Schumacher in the wet? Not very often, I would suggest.
Yeah.
This race, I don't know. I won't. I'll leave one of you to describe it a bit in a moment. But the thing about this one is that Damon sort of went beyond his natural ability during this race, I believe, and I think he suggests that in some of the stuff we've pulled out in the book about the way he felt about it. And it's something that I'm sure you've done podcasts and things about it, but where drivers go beyond where they're comfortable, outside your comfort zone. And I think Senna got into that sort of crazy business where he sort of almost was going beyond himself. Something was taking over. And I think Hill got quite close to it in this race. I think there are other races we've seen or will see where Fangio did it, and Verstappen, this business where he says, I sent the car, I think that's when he actually is going beyond just normal ability and going on to absolute faith and belief that the car's going to hold together and his talent is going to allow him to make it. And that's a thing that not many drivers display, but when they do it, they're going into another zone. And I think that's what Damon did in this race.
And we should say, Stuart, this is in the background of a championship contest as well, penultimate round.
Yes.
He basically, if he'd lost to Schumacher in this race, it was sort of game over, wasn't it? Not mathematically, but realistically. So he sort of had to win. Schumacher come back from his ban. Oh, it's the wet. Schumacher led early on. I think Damon said that he knew he just had to hang on to the light of the Benetton and just keep it inside. And again, another one of these races where they absolutely disappear down the road from everybody else. And it's on aggregate as well, isn't it? It's one of these strange races that...
They had to get the slide rule and the abacus or whatever out to decide this, because the race was stopped, quite early on, lap 13 or something, because also an eerie precursor of Jules Bianchi's accident, in that one car crashed, marshals went to attend, and then Martin Brundle slid off at the same point and hit a marshal as it happened, but could quite easily have been the car itself. And that was an accident that could have been a lot worse. And I think in the context of everything else going on that year, maybe a bit more attention could have been taken after that, because 10 years later, nasty things really did happen there.
20 years later.
Yeah. Oh yes.
Amazing.
Oh yeah. Sorry. There goes my maths. Yeah. Lost the decade. But yes, Suzuka in the wet, Suzuka in the dry is a great driver's circuit. Suzuka in the wet, very, very scary. So really, he'll find another level.
So just for a bit of context, of course, so it boils down to Schumacher had an extra stop. Unusually, Benetton maybe not getting the strategy quite right, and that gave Hill the track position. But Schumacher only had to get within a certain distance of him, and he's catching him, and Damon just pulled something special out of the bag over. He actually pulled away on the last lap.
That's right, he did pulled out.
Pretty remarkable, and I think he's. We did a podcast with him recently. He's got his film out, of course, and he's. He says in that he basically said on his last day, I'm spent, I need some help there, and give me a bit of a hand. And Damon's not the sort of person that talks like that normally, so I think that's his way of demonstrating that he was kind of in that zone. So and of course it set up the finale, which is a different podcast series perhaps. And actually Damon describes the early laps of the Australian Grand Prix as just being a continuation. Obviously it's in the dry, but just not letting Schumacher get away, and in a sort of dogged determination that he hadn't been able to summon earlier in the season. So, worthy.
Definitely a duel.
Definitely a duel. Any objections so far?
No, like I said, I've got over my objections to China 2010 quite quickly.
Any duels that you think should be in on your
tricky
travel
one
before we get to number one?
I think that there are probably a few that will end up a few races where there might have been things you would have described as duels, but will probably end up in other.
That's probably a fair point to make, actually, isn't it, Roger? That at times we had to be a little bit arbitrary as to which chapter some of these races ended up in, because some races obviously are relevant. Like we said about the Chinese Grand Prix in 2010, it could have been in the wet weather episode and chapter, but you have to make a call to try and get as many of the races in as possible.
I was going to say it earlier on, actually, that one example of that is Buggetti's famous victory in 1961 in the French Grand Prix, beating Gurney by 0.1.
Yes.
Shouldn't that be in the thrillers chapter, because it's a very close finish? But no, it's gone into surprise victories, because the surprise element of it is even bigger than the closeness of the finish. And so we put it in that chapter.
I imagine you sitting there in this darkened room, illuminated by just one light above you, and thrashing it out.
Well, you did go back.
Your imagination is incredible.
It was hard at times.
It was
quite a fun process. Hopefully it's fun for people to see the results.
It's meant to be fun, exactly.
Exactly. The idea is to cover off as many good races and great performances as possible. Really, it's the rich tapestry of F1. That's essentially what we're talking about. Right, which brings us very nicely to number one, which is unique on this list for not being a duel for the lead. But we put it number one. So the 1979 French Grand Prix at Dijon won. I mean, actually, it could have gone into a sort of a folklore thing, because it's Jean-Pierre Jabouille giving Renault the first turbocharged F1 victory.
What a great moment that is in itself.
Completely and utterly
Absolutely,
overshadowed
but what's going on
by the
behind?
battle for second. So, Roger, would you like to explain
Well,
the two protagonists?
it's the famous one that I'm sure everyone knows about and loves, the Arnaud Villeneuve duel. Now, was it a duel? Because actually they only got fairly close to each other in those closing 3 laps. But I think it was a duel.
I think it's so intense.
Yeah.
Because Arnaud had to come in here. Everything had gone wrong for Arnaud at the beginning. Villeneuve had taken the lead. Then you had Jabouille take the lead and go on to win. And the duel part of it was Arnaud sort of dragging his car to
He
get.
had a slight issue, didn't he? I think.
Yes, I think he did.
But the Renault was faster, and Villeneuve's tyres were. But I mean, Gilles Villeneuve wouldn't pit for tyres, and I mean, sometimes even when I was going to say,
When they were falling off.
so it was one of those absolute stubborn refusal to be beaten type drives from Villeneuve, wasn't it?
Yes, and from Arnaud. Arnaud wanted to have a 1-2 finish, didn't he? I mean, it was the French Grand Prix at Dijon, and how wonderful that would have been. And but anyway, it ends up in that amazing wheel banging period that everyone, I'm sure, realizes and knows full well. And it was a great race, and I think number 1 in terms of a duel is a worthy position for it.
It's the one that people most reference, I think. My favourite part of it is when Arnaud's just come past and down into the first corner, Villeneuve chucks it. And I think there's a point where all 4 tyres are locked up.
Yes, it's 1, 2, 3, 4. And then it
What's
goes.
amazing is he makes the apex. He doesn't tank in there and push Arnaud off the track. He gets it down the inside alongside. Arnaud gives him enough room to survive, and Villeneuve uses it. Like, it is an amazing piece of driving. Less brilliant is the bit later on down the hill
Yeah, he clips
when they're
it,
side by side going to the left hander, and Villeneuve just turns in on him.
Yeah.
And because they've got big fat chunky tyres and not complicated barge boards, they just sort of bounce off each other, which you wouldn't probably get away with now. That's the one moment I think that would create a crash in a different type of car. But otherwise, it's a hard but clean fight that I think both enjoyed. And in fact, I think Arnaud even now considers it as a kind of an honour, if you like, to have been part of it, even though he lost that particular duel, which I think is fair enough.
I think he does, and I didn't realise this before I was researching it. He says, "I always considered Villeneuve my best friend in Formula One," said Arnaud, which I hadn't fully realised. To me, the name Gilles Villeneuve symbolises a real acrobat behind the wheel, someone who drives at the limit on every corner, every time. And I thought that would summed up Gilles Villeneuve.
That's brilliant, isn't it? Acrobat.
Beautifully.
Yeah.
Acrobat.
And that's why he had
acrobatic.
so many fans, and also why so many people debate, how great was he? Did he take too much out of the machinery, or actually did he get over that, and all that sort of thing? There may be other races in other episodes which answer that question.
I have to say, because I was going to argue about this one or raise a contra point.
Yeah, do.
So, but then actually I couldn't, because when I saw it at number 1, I thought, is this a race where everyone kind of looks at it through John Inverdale's spectacles, and we put the rose tinted lenses in and get all misty eyed about it? So I went back and watched. I found a thing on YouTube that had no commentary on it, and it just is incredible because of the way they go at each other, and there is wheel banging, as Roger says, but it's. I hesitate to use the word polite, but there's no harm done. And also just that moment where you see Villeneuve just kind of send it, and all the wheels lock up. The other thing is that you can see is how hairy those ground effect cars were, with the way they lift, the porpoising, the bouncing, and how hard it must have been to control them at that given point, because whatever downforce they were making was just disappearing every time they went.
Well, and the tyres were. Especially on the Friday was stuff. I suppose you'd be going into too much detail to ask him really, but the final deciding move, Arnaud leaving the door open into that uphill right-hander, and you just think, why did you do that? He's already shown you where he's going to, if you give him half a sniff, he's going to send the car down the inside, because I think Villeneuve knew if Arnaud was ahead for too long, the Renault would go away. So he basically had to react immediately.
Yeah.
And Arnaud opens the door and says, thanks very much, through that. So there we go. The number one duel, the 1979 French Grand Prix, and I think probably apologies to Jean-Pierre Jabouille. That's pretty much his only appearance. But the winner of the race isn't here for that. So 1970 Belgian Grand Prix was 10, 2006 Bahrain Grand Prix 9, then the 2010 Chinese Grand Prix, the 1970 German Grand Prix, 2024 Azerbaijan GP, the most recent race on this list, 1953 French Grand Prix, 2014 Bahrain Grand Prix, and then the big three, the 1969 British Grand Prix here at Silverstone, 1994 Japanese Grand Prix, and number one, 1979 French Grand Prix at Dijon, which didn't even come into the debate that I had the other day about greatest F1 circuits, but has now topped a different list. So there we go.
Who would ever have thought Dijon would cut the mustard?
Oh, he was so far into it.
Beautiful.
He was so far into it. We could just cut
I wish I'd
my
come up with that
Just do it.
entry. Just leave it in. Well, I was going to say thank you to Stuart Codling, but now I can say, well, the door's over there. Thank you very much, Rod Smith. Thank you very much for joining us. We'll be back soon with another Autosport podcast.